From humble beginnings in Preston Pans, Scotland, to becoming Britain's first undisputed champion in the four-belt era, Josh Taylor has etched his name into British boxing legend. The long southpaw combined aggressive pressure with high-level technical skill to become a force in the super lightweight division. Nowadays, however, Taylor is far away from his glory days at the top of the sport. His recent loss to the very efficient Essimon marked what is, for me, his fourth straight loss, as I of course counted the Jack Catterall first fight as a loss like everyone else did. So how did an elite fighter who belonged on the pound for pound list fall so fast? Has he checked out of the sport? What does his future hold? Well, these are the questions I'm going to try my best to answer in this video. This is the rise and fall of the Tartan Tornado, Josh Taylor. Born in the small Scottish town of Preston Pans, Josh's first combat sport wouldn't be boxing, but in fact taekwondo. He was very talented as a martial artist and earned himself a black belt before switching to boxing at 15. Which is surprisingly old, especially for someone who would go on to achieve the level of success he would in the professional game. When Josh entered into Loch End Amateur Boxing Club in Edinburgh, coach Terry McCormack could instantly spot the raw talent in the young Scot. Over the next few years, Terry would mould Taylor into a top-tier amateur. Taylor's first big success in the amateurs would come in 2010, where he would win a silver medal in the Commonwealth Games, something that Josh was far from happy with.
Josh Taylor's devastated, he gave it everything.
Second best in it, just getting beat. But good achievement, but wanted the gold there. The next time.
3 or 4 days afterwards I was really disappointed and really in a bad mood and feeling down about myself like the end of the world. But obviously I got over it in the next couple of days and I was really happy, really happy. I wish the medal ceremony was a couple of days later so I had a bit of smile on my face instead of tears
Still looks a wee bit tearful and somebody should put an arm around him and give him a hug and tell him, don't worry son, you've done very, very, very well.
The fact that winning a silver medal brought Josh to tears just highlights the elite level mentality that he has. Josh would then go on to make history in his London 2012 Olympic run.
6 Scots in the pool, but there's only one in the boxing ring, and that's 21-year-old Josh Taylor.
Now, 2 years ago at the Delhi Commonwealth Games, he was reduced to tears when he lost his gold medal winning fight. Now he wants to put all of that right, as our boxing man Phil Goodlad reports.
Last time it was silver, wasn't it good enough? This time it has to be gold.
Representing Great Britain, he was Scotland's first lightweight qualifier since the legendary Dick McTaggart, who, for those who don't know, is one of the best British amateur boxers ever. He went to multiple Olympic Games and won gold and a bronze medal. Unfortunately for Taylor, he wouldn't be able to emulate the same success as his Scottish predecessor, as he would lose out in the round of 16 to seasoned Italian boxer Domenico Valentino. Josh would, however, finish his amateur career capturing the lucrative Commonwealth Games gold medal in 2014.
The winner by unanimous decision, now through to the light-welterweight final in the blue corner.
During his successful amateur career, he would also earn the nickname the Tartan Tornado for his relentless and aggressive fighting style. Josh would retire from the amateur game with a very impressive record of 152 wins and just 12 losses. Josh would turn professional in 2015, signing with Barry McGuigan's Cyclone Promotions, and he'd be trained by the excellent Shane McGuigan. A partnership that would prove to be highly successful, but eventually would end unceremoniously, which I'll get onto later. Taylor wasted very little time going up in levels in the pro ranks, and after winning his first 6 fights by stoppage, he would fight for the vacant Commonwealth Super Lightweight title against the very experienced and very capable domestic fighter Dave Ryan. The classy amateur put on a very dominant and composed performance. He managed to drop Ryan as early as round 3 with a left hook, and in round 5 Taylor would end the fight for good, hurting his man with another brutal body shot, and then following up with a barrage of punches which forced the referee to stop the fight. In just Taylor's 7th professional fight, he had become the new super lightweight Commonwealth champion. In Taylor's 10th fight, he would look to add the WBC silver belt to his collection by taking on one of the biggest trash talkers in British boxing, 15-0 OHara Davis. After all the talk in the lead up to this fight from OHara, on the night he was unable to back up anything he said and was totally outclassed by the much more skilled fighter in Taylor. Taylor was such a class above that he made OHara quit after just 7 rounds. OHara looked one-dimensional in there, looking to load up and land big bombs, while Taylor was much more composed and counterpunched well. It was a great boxing performance from Taylor, and he exposed the limitations of OHara. Taylor was much sharper, firing out slick combinations, and was much more accurate, landing shots from body to head. At the end of the third round, Taylor turned Davis's legs to jelly with a stiff jab, and Davis dropped to his knees for a count. Lucky for Davis, the bell was just around the corner, and he was able to survive the round. Davis would be caught again with a right hook in the fifth that made his legs twitch. And in the sixth round, we saw another onslaught from Taylor, in which he landed shots to the body and temple of Davis. In the seventh round, Taylor continued to dismantle Davis and countered him with a big right hook that floored him.
For that big right again. Right hook from Taylor!
Davis wasn't able to recover, and Taylor would finish him off for good, forcing the referee to stop the fight.
Speed, feet, timing. Is this his moment? Davis!
Following his classy display against OHara, Josh would go up a significant level and out of the British domestic scene when he took on by far the best fighter in his short career, former IBF lightweight champion Miguel Vasquez. Again, I just want to highlight the speed at which Taylor has progressed through the levels in such a short space of time. Yes, Taylor was a standout amateur, but not every great amateur progresses this fast in their professional career. Taylor had to battle with a cut for the majority of the fight, as in the second round, he received a cut above his left eye after a head clash with Vasquez. The Mexican's awkward and elusive style gave Taylor some problems and made it a less comfortable fight for Taylor compared to his previous outings, as Taylor found it hard to pin down the slippery veteran. The Scotsman found a way, however, and ended the fight with a right hook to the body of Vasquez, which made Taylor the first out of 45 opponents to stop the Mexican. Josh would take a step further in his pursuit for the WBC World title when he took on former WBC World Champion Victor Postol in a final eliminator to take on Jose Ramirez. Postol was the first fighter to truly hurt Taylor in his career, as in round 7 he stunned Taylor and had the Scotsman holding on. Taylor would overcome the biggest crisis moment of his career and got his own back, landing a left hand in the 10th round to knock down the Ukrainian. Taylor finished the fight strong and won by unanimous decision. On the 30th of June 2018, it was announced that Taylor would join the World Boxing Super Series Super Lightweight Tournament. For those unaware, this was an 8-man tournament consisting of some of the very best super lightweights in the world, such as Baranchyk and Regis Progra. For the quarterfinals, Taylor would be matched up with 22-0 American Ryan Martin. This was a disappointing fight to watch, if I'm being honest. Martin covered up mostly and failed to let his hands go, and with very little coming back at him, Taylor just teed off on him with lots of punches. Taylor mostly found success landing to the body, as Martin was quite good at blocking his attempts at throwing headshots. The American looked scared and unwilling to engage, which allowed Taylor to dominate the fight. In the 7th round, Taylor would land a rabbit punch that hurt Martin, and from there Taylor unloaded on him to score a knockout, which was pretty controversial because the referee missed the punch behind the head, which massively contributed to the knockout. Controversy aside though, that doesn't take away from what an excellent performance this was from Taylor, and let's be honest, there was only one man that deserved to win that night. With this win, Taylor had now earned himself a shot against the IBF champion Ivan Baranchyk. Taylor knew quickly that he was in for a difficult night, as the smaller man in Baranchyk would silence the partisan crowd in the early rounds with some powerful punches. Taylor would gradually work his way into the fight and prove his class in the 6th round, where he would drop the champion twice, and from then on Taylor would win most of the remaining rounds. Baranchyk was still dangerous throughout, showing an excellent work rate and never giving up on himself, and did his best to try turn the tide of the fight in the last few rounds, but it just wasn't enough to change the outcome, and Taylor would win by unanimous decision. Taylor was now in the final of the Super Series tournament, and waiting for him would be the excellent rising American star, Regis Progra. In a sold-out O2 Arena in London, the fight was a perfect example of what the best fighting the best looks like. It was a highly technical, highly skilled fight, with every round being competitive. The early rounds of the fight were rough and physical, fought at close quarters. Progra was doing some of his best work in these rounds, landing some good body shots, and his jab looked good. As the fight headed into the middle rounds, Taylor was starting to take over the fight. The sharpness that Progra had in the early rounds just seemed to disappear, and his slick movement wasn't able to get him out of trouble. Progra was still presenting a threat to Taylor, and in round 8 he managed to land a fantastic counter left which gave him some much needed momentum. In the last few rounds of the fight, Progra was visibly fatigued, and this resulted in him being hit by stiff punches from Taylor, but Progra showed great durability to take those shots well. Both men finished the fight well, trading big punches and showing lots of heart and determination. After a very entertaining 12-round fight, Josh would win by majority decision and was now the WBA, IBF and Ring Magazine super lightweight champion, and had also captured the Muhammad Ali trophy. In January of 2020, Josh would make a shock move from Barry McGuigan's Cyclone Promotions to Top Rank, signing a multi-year promotional deal. This also meant that Taylor was parting ways with his career-long trainer Shane McGuigan. Now in hindsight, leaving Shane was a huge mistake in my opinion. From his debut, Shane had crafted Taylor into a world-class operator, and I feel if he had stayed, we maybe wouldn't have seen such a decline in performances from Taylor, but who knows. The split was acrimonious, with Cyclone Promotions claiming that Taylor was still under a valid contract, while Taylor argued that the agreement had been breached, rendering it invalid. Now I don't know who was in the wrong, but what I do know is that Carl Frampton famously had a similar issue with contract disputes with the McGuigans, and that relationship broke down in a much more hostile way. All I'm saying is, the McGuigans have history of fighters falling out with them. However, I can understand from Shane and Barry's perspective why they'd feel quite bitter and angry with the situation, especially considering Shane developed Taylor all the way to world level, and he was on the brink of fighting for Undisputed and getting into some huge money fights. But at the end of the day, a fighter's career is short, and Josh did what he thought was in his best interest. Following the split from Shane McGuigan, Josh would enlist the services of up-and-coming British trainer Ben Davidson. Now, I know many don't like Davidson for many different reasons. A lot of the time it's not about boxing, but he's got some qualities that I really like as a trainer, the main one being his very analytical mindset. He's got a very smart boxing brain, and I do rate him, not as much as Shane, but I think he's talented nonetheless. Taylor's first fight under Ben's guidance would come against obscure Thai fighter Appinan Kongsong. Now, there's not too much to say about this performance, as Taylor was clearly many levels above his challenger and stopped Kongsong with a body shot in the very first round. Now, with most of the champions and contenders dealt with, Josh had only one fighter to face next to capture the undisputed crown, the WBC and WBO world champion Jose Ramirez. Luckily for both men, Ramirez's mandatory challenger at the time, Jack Catterall, agreed to step aside to allow for the undisputed fight to take place. So on May 22nd, 2021, Josh and Jose Ramirez would throw down for all the marbles. The opening round of the fight was close, with both men picking their shots well. However, I felt Ramirez started much more cautiously out of the two, especially in the second round, where he only started to let his hands go in the final 30 seconds of the round, whereas Taylor was using his solid hand speed to land on Ramirez. Ramirez would get back into the fight in the third round and was beginning to build up confidence as the fight was heading into the middle rounds. He was landing the better shots in my opinion. However, at the start of round 6, Taylor would land the most significant shot of the fight so far, when he landed a short left hand counter right on the jaw of Ramirez, which dropped him. Ramirez, to his credit, would immediately go on the offense as soon as the fight resumed. Taylor was fighting smart and didn't allow himself to get involved in a dogfight. Instead, he was picking his shots from a distance, and it was working well. In the 7th round, the speed and power of Taylor was continuing to cause Ramirez problems, and in the final 30 seconds of the round, Taylor landed a big left uppercut, which dropped Ramirez for the second time. Ramirez was much more hurt compared to his first knockdown, but he managed to survive the last few seconds of the round, while Taylor was trying his best to get him out of there. The remainder of the fight was closely contested, with both men finding success. However, I did feel that Taylor took a few rounds off, which allowed for Ramirez to get more into the fight. After 12 rounds of high-level action, Josh Taylor would win by unanimous decision and made history by becoming the first British undisputed champion in the 4-belt era, and had also become the second Scotsman to become undisputed after the late great Ken Buchanan. Now, while not being technically correct, this for many people, including myself, was Taylor's last true victory, as Taylor's career would do a complete 180 following this fight. And it all started when he defended his undisputed crown against the WBO mandatory challenger, Jack Catterall. Including Jack Catterall, this meant that Josh Taylor's last 6 opponents have had a combined record of 133 wins and 0 losses. That is just an incredible stat, and just goes to show how Taylor will literally fight anyone, and fighters like that deserve a lot of respect from us fans. The fight with Catterall was supposed to take place in December of 2021, but Taylor would unfortunately suffer a knee injury in training, and the fight would be pushed to February 26, 2022. This was the first of multiple major injuries that Taylor would suffer over the next few years, which definitely contributed to his decline in my opinion. On the surface, this fight with Catterall looked like it was going to be a celebration of the achievements of Josh Taylor. He was back home in Scotland, fighting in the Hydro Arena in Glasgow, a place very familiar to Josh as it was where he had some of his finest nights in his career. And his opponent in Jack Catterall was seen as a decent contender, but I expected, like most did, for Taylor to look good and take care of business. Catterall had been inactive coming into this fight and hadn't fought anyone anywhere near the level of Taylor before. Well, I couldn't have been more wrong, it turned out. Jack Catterall boxed to a perfect game plan while Josh struggled to get going and was getting frustrated throughout the entire fight. By the time the fight reached the halfway stage, Catterall was well ahead in my opinion. He landed the cleaner and more effective punches, while Taylor was struggling to land anything of substance. Josh was looking to target the body as instructed by his trainer Ben Davidson, but his accuracy and power was just off, and he was being countered by big shots from Catterall. It was getting desperate for Josh, who was now having to battle with a bad cut while being comfortably outboxed. This was a puzzle Josh was failing to solve. Things would go from bad to worse for Taylor as Catterall would score a knockdown in round 8, landing a left-right combination which floored the champion. Once the action resumed, there was serious urgency from Taylor's side and he came out firing, looking to try get a knockdown of his own. By the end of what was a 10-8 round, Taylor and his team were beginning to panic, clearly thinking they needed a knockout to win. Lucky for them, the clown that is Ian John Lewis had other ideas. The crowd did their best to motivate and hype up their man in the following round, but it just wasn't working as Catterall had a tight grip on the fight, rarely allowing Taylor to gain any advantage. Taylor did get something out of the 10th round as Catterall was docked a point for holding, which, to be fair, both men were guilty of. This was a better round from Taylor and he did have some success, but not enough to wrestle control of the fight. In round 11, Josh was docked a point himself for punching Catterall after the bell, which was a bit harsh. I mean, it's not exactly like Josh just poleaxed Catterall, he just tapped him, which he shouldn't have done, but emotions were high and he was clearly losing the fight, so I just thought the point deduction was harsh. All Catterall needed to do now was to see out the last round, keep his cool, stick to his boxing, and he would become the undisputed super lightweight champion of the world. He won the majority of the rounds comfortably, got a knockdown, and Taylor was docked a point. So there's no way that they can rob him. They just can't. Oh wait, yes they can. Yeah, they actually did that. Only one judge had the fight in Jack's favour, and that was by a single round. Ian John Lewis scored it 114-111 for Taylor. That just isn't incompetence, that's plain corruption for all to see. Out of 12 rounds, Catterall outlanded Josh in 11 of them. Jack scored 120 punches to Taylor's 73 and landed 81 power shots to Taylor's 57. And as I said, he also scored a knockdown, plus Josh was docked a point. The decision was so unbelievably awful that the Irish gambling company Paddy Power stated that they would be refunding all stakes placed by their customers on Catterall to win the bout. Taylor would be out of action for over a year following this fight and unfortunately picked up another injury. This time he tore a ligament in the arch of his foot while training in Liverpool. This injury would delay the Catterall rematch and eventually the WBO came calling and ordered Taylor to face the very high profile contender Teofimo Lopez. After a long absence from the ring, Taylor was finally back in action and would headline in the Madison Square Garden Theatre against the takeover Teofimo Lopez. Taylor would just be defending his WBO and Ring Magazine belts, as Taylor was stripped and vacated the other belts himself. You could really start to see the unravelling of Taylor's career. Injuries coupled with inactivity and the controversy of the Catterall fight was really starting to take its toll. Things wouldn't get much better for Taylor as he was completely outboxed by the younger, sharper and more skilled fighter on the night in Teofimo. The style of Teo was all wrong for Taylor and he struggled to change up his game plan and adapt. Lopez was beating him to the punch in almost every exchange in the fight, and by the final few rounds, Taylor just looked mentally defeated. After 12 rounds of mostly one-sided action, Tapimo would win by unanimous decision and had taken Josh Taylor's last world title. Taylor had now been soundly outboxed in 2 straight fights and never looked to be able to change up his style to win either fight. After losing his world title and coming off the back of 2 straight losses, the options for Taylor were much more limited, and the fight that made the most sense, especially financially, was to do the rematch with Catterall, and so the fight was agreed. However, Taylor would once again get injured with yet another foot injury, and this would delay the rematch into May of 2024. The rematch was a tale of 2 halves. For the first 6 rounds of the fight, it was essentially a continuation of the first fight, with Catterall well ahead in my opinion, although rounds 2 and 3 are definitely close. Catterall was landing the more eye-catching shots and was the more accurate. However, in round 7, Taylor was starting to get himself more into the fight and upped his output considerably. Looking at the CompuBox stats, it showed that Taylor was throwing and landing more shots than Catterall, which in their first meeting was just not the case at all, as Catterall outlanded Josh in nearly every round. Taylor did by far his best work in this half of the fight, but he didn't quite do enough to turn the tide, as I felt Catterall stalled the last 2 rounds. After 12 rounds of entertaining action, Jack would get his revenge and win by unanimous decision. I definitely had Jack winning the fight quite clearly, but I thought the scorecards were too wide, especially 117-111 for Catterall, which, again, is just another example of just awful judging. It was a much more improved performance from Taylor though, compared to the first fight, but it just ultimately was not enough. Following what was now Josh's 3rd defeat in his career, he would move up to welterweight, something fans have wanted him to do for some time, as he was huge for 140. To welcome him to his new division would be the solid European level fighter Essimon. For the first half of the fight, Josh looked good. There was genuine moments in that fight where I could see the old Josh Taylor. He looked fast and sharp and was showing he was a level above Essimon. However, Josh wasn't able to keep it up for the whole 12 rounds, whereas Essimon, who is appropriately nicknamed the Engine, was able to keep up the pace for the full duration of the fight. After 12 rounds, Echo won by unanimous decision. As someone who's admired the skill and ability of Josh over the years, this fight was a sad watch. It was just sad to see his body fail him in the back end of the fight. If this is a prime Josh Taylor we're talking about, he wins this fight very comfortably, and I respect and rate Essimon highly. This was honestly the type of fight that tells me a fighter is done and it's time to call quits on your career. The phrase, "the body isn't able to do what the mind wants," comes to mind when watching this fight. So that's the rise and fall of Josh Taylor. The question is now, where does Josh go in his career? Well, he's at a crossroads. His legacy as a modern great is secured, but his future is uncertain. What I don't want to happen is for Josh to be a high profile name that contenders can beat to boost their profile. I think Josh is damaged goods now, and despite showing some moments of brilliance in his recent fight with Essimon, fights are not just 6 rounds, and he's going to continue to struggle if he carries on. So I'd personally like to see him retire. As of recording this video in early June, he hasn't retired, but let's just wait and see. He's still relatively young, but fighting at the level that Josh has been fighting at for so many years now takes a hell of a lot out of you. If Taylor does decide to call it a day, what is his legacy in the sport? Well, he's one of the best British fighters in the modern era. That is a statement of unequivocal fact. His body of work from 2018 to 2021 was absolutely superb, and of course he became the first British Undisputed champion in the 4-belt era, which is a monumental achievement. There's just no doubt in my mind that Josh has earned a seat at the top table, the Mount Rushmore of great British fighters of the modern era. Losing his last 4 fights doesn't take away from his greatness in my opinion, especially when you consider the level at which he's fighting at. He's not losing to weak opposition. So let me know in the comments below what you make of Josh Taylor's career, and also, do you think he should continue in the sport? As always, thanks very much for watching.